Welcome to our third video in this series on the NDIS funding and case review and planning process within animal-assisted therapy. Now, I'd just like to speak to the actual processes of and steps involved in a clinical behavior support review. Now, there's layers of this that are helpful to be aware of regardless of your role. For example, you're a parent or a carer, you need to understand the processes involved, the steps involved. The more that you are aware of that, the more that you can assist the behavior specialist, but also you can evaluate what the behavior specialist is doing and if the work is going to provide you with the goals and outcomes that you need within the individual's life and with the funding review that will be involved in that. So if you're a support coordinator, the same. You need to understand some of the steps involved. If you're a manager within a disability service, you want to understand these steps and you want to be able to see whether or not the reports that are developed by the behavior practitioner are going to be useful and effective to fund the needs of the case, which is a critically important aspect because you want to pay your staff and you want the individual's needs to be properly addressed. And if you're another therapist, like an occupational therapist, you would need to understand also what the behavior practitioner needs to do and what the steps are involved in that. And, that would assist you also in your roles and the tasks and steps that you engage in your assessment processes. So there's a whole range of reasons why this particular presentation is important, this discussion. If you're an animal assistance specialist, and you provide the trained animal, an autism assistance dog, for example, your understanding this process is really, really important. And let's differentiate, as we've been doing throughout the course, that there are many different levels and ways of providing animal assistance therapy work, and that you can have less formal approaches. And these could involve visitation with animals. These could involve integrating trained animals to a certain degree, trained therapy animals that are used, for example, in visiting aged care facilities or working with children in disability centers or day service centers or in home visitations, where a therapist would come into the home with an animal and allow the child or adult to have visitation time and structured activities and whatnot. So there's a lot of different layers to this. And then you have an autism assistance dog, which is a fully trained canine specialist dog who is highly developed in their skills and capacities to work with an individual with autism. And there are, as we say in the previous discussions, a number of criterias and steps and evaluative processes that the autism specialist dog trainers engage in training the handlers and integrating the use of that dog within the home and within the other services that are involved in the care of the child or the adult, as the case might be. The behavior support process is really crucial when implementing animal-assisted therapy work for people with autism and for people with complex needs, whether those needs would be developmental, psychosocial, mental health, or disability-related diagnosis. The first step is assessment and identification. Conducting a thorough assessment is really important. And this would be an assessment of the individual's behavior, their strengths, challenges, their triggers, and potential goals. We need to identify specific behaviors that need support and intervention. Step 2 is define the goals and objectives. Clearly define measurable and realistic behavioral goals. These should be specific, observable, and achievable, and identify short-term and long-term objectives related to the individual's overall well-being and functioning. All of this, of course, is set in the context of the individual's life and their developmental pattern, where they are, how old they are, what their capacities are, how their communication works, and how do they prefer activities, and what are their interests, strengths, and capacities. The third step is to develop their functional behavior assessment or analysis. Conducting a behavior functional assessment to understand the antecedents or triggers for behaviors and the consequences of the targeted behaviors, how that cycle works. This analysis helps identify the function or purpose of the behavior. The fourth step is collaboration with stakeholders, engaging with individuals, their family members and caregivers, their therapists, and any other relevant stakeholders, including their general practitioner, doctor, specialist in the medical field, or a specialist within the NDIS side of services. All of these individuals need to be consulted at some level, and a collaborative process engaged to share information and develop the goal setting and intervention strategies. We often share our drafts of our behavior plans with a range of practitioners where we have consent with the individual or their carers or guardians. So these consultative processes are extremely important, and I just want to emphasize that the collaborative nature of developing a behavior support plan is incredibly important. And we have the concept of endorsement at the end of the plan, where the stakeholders, particularly the family, the guardian or parents, and the disability providers that are providing that primary role of support on a daily basis, they're invited to and asked to sign off on the behavior support plan. The concept there historically in the field is that by endorsing the plan, people are saying basically, I've been involved in developing this plan and I agree with, and I can implement this plan on a day-to-day basis. And when you really think about those statements, it's so important that the behavior practitioner engages with people to develop the plan together, and that they don't just go off and write it on their own and then present it at the end. It's a collaborative process. The fifth step is using a strength-based approach, and we emphasize this quite a lot, that focusing on the individual's strengths and their positive attributes is really important to amplify that and to bring that forward within the plan, because any strategies that you develop need to be real life and they need to support the individual. There just cannot be a punitive or negative approach to these issues. It needs to be positive behavior support focused. This is identifying strategies that leverage their strengths to promote positive behavior and overall well-being and functioning. The sixth step is intervention strategies. This is developing specific intervention strategies that are based on the identified goals and the results of the functional behavior assessment. These strategies may include positive reinforcement, environmental modifications, and skill-building activities. Number 7 is the role of the autism assistance dog needs to be worked into the plan in very specific and strategic ways. We clearly identify and outline the role of the autism assistance dog in supporting the individual's behavior goals. We specify how the dog will assist in reducing anxiety, for example, promoting social interactions, or addressing sensory needs. We may develop a plan around sleep hygiene and enabling the use of the dog to help the child to sleep in their own bedroom, in their own bed. The transition there for the child who may have a history of sleeping with their parents could be quite lengthy over several months, where the changes of behavior need to be continually reinforced and encouraged through the creative use of the assistance dog to help the child to sleep in their own bed. Number 8 is training and support of the dog handlers. Providing training to the handlers, including the individual and relevant caregivers, on how to interact with the autism assistance dog and reinforce positive behaviors is really quite important. When we're talking about a child, obviously, the child is unlikely to be a dog handler and will need continual supervision around the clock when working with the autism assistance dog. This includes teaching commands and cues that promote the desired behaviors in both the dog and the individual who is benefiting by the presence of the canine specialist. Step 9 is monitoring and data collection. Monitoring and data collection as step 9 establishes a system for monitoring and collecting of data that is an easy process for those involved on a day-to-day basis, especially where we're talking about a family. Often a family environment does not include the expectation of collecting data, in the sense that it's difficult for family members to be filling out behavior assessment forms or escalation description forms or behavioral incident reports. It's a very difficult process for a lot of family members to even think about that level of complexity in terms of reporting. So woven into the whole process, the behavior practitioner needs to touch base with the family on a fairly regular basis and have a plan in place of collecting this data through a dialogue and through a series of not so much interviews, but conversations around what's happening and how that's going and how things are progressing or where the challenges and obstacles might be and how to work through those and troubleshoot new solutions. So it's a very solution-focused, positive, and strength-based approach that we use. We're establishing this system for monitoring and collecting data for a number of reasons, because it helps with designing the behavioral strategies for support that actually make a difference and that help. But it's also to understand what is the least intervention that we could do that would make the most difference. And thinking this way is really important because we don't want to overwhelm people with a large degree of changes or expectations. They won't work anyway. So we want to keep things as simple and as elegant as we can. And you look for the smallest change that makes the biggest difference. It's a core principle that we use all the time. We also collect data to regularly track the progress towards the goals and to assess the effectiveness of the intervention strategies. But on a larger, more global perspective, we're looking at these objective measures for frequency, duration, and intensity of behaviors as potential measures to justify the funding or to adjust the needs of the funding. For example, if overnight awake staff shifts are required, there needs to be a fair bit of data collected that justifies the expense of paying the staff for being awake all night and being with the client in that sense. Step number 10 then is crisis management planning. We develop a crisis management plan that includes specific steps that could be taken in the event of challenging behaviors or full-blown crisis. These include contact information for relevant support services and professionals, Preparing ahead for a crisis is really a useful and important thing, because sometimes the practitioner, particularly if they're working via telehealth, may fall out of contact with the family when the family is in crisis. And crisis amongst families can happen quite regularly and periodically. And they can be related to what might seem from the outside as simple issues, but it's not simple for the family, and they have to work through those problems and find their own sense of balance and harmony again so they can re-engage with the therapy processes. And it is a very demanding process to be involved in therapy, especially families with children with complex needs. There could be a half a dozen specialists involved in their life on any regular basis. And that demands a lot of time and attention, and it's draining for parents to deal with this level of complexity. We need to understand that and help them through that in some manner or other. And the autism assistance dog aspects are fairly intense, I have to say. When you get to the level of a specialist trained autism assistance dog, you are involved in a wide range of professionals that are helping to monitor and ensure that that program is going along, at its proper pace, so to speak, and that progress is being made. This is a demanding process for families. The 12th step is to develop a clear communication plan. And this is just to establish clear lines of communication amongst the stakeholders that are included within regular updates, meetings, perhaps on a bi-monthly or at least biannual schedule, that challenges can be addressed and adjustments to the behavior support plan can be looked at and engaged. And this is to ensure that open lines of communication with the autism assistance dog provider are also happening there. And these need to be reinforced and encouraged. Once this program has been running for a while, touching base between the practitioners within the different aspects of that support system is a really important process. Often, I think the behavior practitioner is a pivotal role that assists in that web of communication between the different stakeholders. And I think part of that is because of the foundational and central role that the behavior support plan can play to help the various members of the stakeholder team to understand how they're all working for that same purpose, to help the individual to function, to grow, and to manifest their best self, and over time to grow and to face their developmental challenges with more resilience and more capacity. The 13th step that we have is to keep detailed records of documentation to assist the individual's behavior interventions and outcomes, not only for behavior, but in terms of their funding reviews, and also to track progress and share information amongst the practitioners involved, and to, in some manner, feed that back to the NDIS, to the funding agency. And that also means that the practitioners are functioning optimally when they communicate with each other, so that they're coming from the same place. Basically, when they're working in communication with the funding agency, it's important that the team has a cohesiveness to it and that people are on the same page. This is really helpful, because when there's disagreements or when there are misunderstandings that lead to disagreements, which is more the case, I think, that those issues need to be worked out, and they need to be resolved so that the case can move forward, so the individual's needs can be addressed in the most positive way possible. This is then the comprehensive steps involved in a behavior support planning process. And I hope this is helpful for you to understand the process and what's involved. Thank you for listening.